Welcome to Homestead Gardening in the Texas Gulf Coast with Kristen Howard. One of the most common questions vegetable gardeners ask is whether or not they should prune their vegetable plants, which plants they should prune, and how to do it. Vegetable garden plants are usually only alive in our garden for 6 to 8 months until they produce food before they are removed and replaced with another seasonal crop. So although it's not critical to prune vegetable plants with a short season, pruning the right plants at the right time can increase fruit yields, increase harvest from leafy plants, and can even reduce fungal and pest problems. Many gardeners debate whether or not to prune tomato plants. To know whether or not to prune your tomato plants and how to do it, you must first know which type of tomato plant you are growing. For indeterminate or vining tomato plants that produce fruit throughout the season instead of all at once, like determinate tomato plants, it's best to prune to a single main stem or 2 stems to make sure the plant keeps energy moving up the stem instead of splitting energy among many branching stems. To remove future stems early, look for a newly forming small stem located between a leaf and the main stem. This newly forming small stem, although it can eventually produce fruit, is not where fruit is formed along the main stem. Instead, fruit is formed opposite the leaf on the other side of the main stem, making it easy to tell the difference between the two. You can always go a step further with your pruning, cleaning up the main stem by removing leaves along the way, promoting airflow, and removing hiding places for many pests. Indeterminate tomato plants are great for humid climates and vertical gardening, as these plants can be trained upright and heavily pruned. You can also opt to use this method to remove branching on other vining crops, especially those like pumpkin, to focus energy and produce a larger single fruit per vine. For determinate or bush tomato plants, I recommend only trimming off leaves restricting airflow or that are lower to the ground that are more likely to have fungal issues. But in general, the plant does not need to be heavily pruned. Herbs, however, should be pruned the opposite of indeterminate tomato plants. Because gardeners use the leaves of the herb instead of the flower or fruit, the goal is to reduce fruiting and promote vegetative growth. Herbs that are not pruned can get leggy or top-heavy, will flower and go to seed sooner, and will offer smaller, less frequent harvests. Pruned herbs grow bushy side shoots and offer a lot of vegetation over a single season, making it easier to grow more in a smaller amount of space. To correctly prune herbs, you want to look for new small stems growing between a leaf and the main stem. Keep the new small stems by cutting just above them. This is called pruning above a node, or you may have heard this called topping. You can take your pruning a step further by removing the leaves just below the small stems. By pruning in this way and removing extra vegetation, the plant will put more energy into the small stems and force branching and leaf growth. You can continue to use this practice of pruning above a node throughout the growing season for continuous harvest and additional branching, or just to shape the plant. Here's an example of a basil plant that was not pruned during the growing season. Compared to a basil plant grown at the same time, pruned above a node 3 times during the growing season. The single stem basil is compact and has never been harvested from, but the multi-stem basil has yielded 3 harvests and is still larger than the single stem basil in this particular case. If you prune peppers, do this once early in the growing season to force branching and avoid having a tall, lanky plant. Keep in mind, this may delay fruiting, but if you have a long growing season like we do in Houston, use this to your advantage by growing a large, sturdy plant in spring and harvest higher yields in fall. Thanks so much for learning with me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you can join me each week to learn about interesting plant selections and gardening tips for the Texas Gulf Coast.